All right, here we go for part 2 of chapter 7 lecture. So there's this guy called Saint Cyril, and he and his brother they were Byzantine priests, and they were missionaries. So they traveled to Eastern Europe and into Russia, and they are responsible for converting the people that lived there. They're called the Slavs, or the Slavic people, and as part of being Christians, they believed that it was their mission to spread the faith and spread the gospel. And one of the ways they were able to do this, to convert so many people, is because that the Slavic people, they didn't have a written language, and so they came up with an alphabet called the Cyrillic alphabet, and basically is is based off of the Greek alphabet, and it is the alphabet that is used throughout Eastern Europe and throughout Russia. So as the Slavic people of Europe and Russia, as they began to adopt Christianity, they also began to be educated because they believe, of course, that they have to read and understand the Bible in order to be good Christians. So by spreading into Europe and into Russia, basically Christianity will continue, Orthodox Christianity will continue even long after the eventual fall of the Byzantine Empire. So let's talk about the economy of the Byzantines. The Byzantines were mainly agricultural, and they really worked at trying to keep the concentration of wealth and land to a minimum. So one of the things they did is they offered peasants the land if they served in the military, and then they gave these territories to generals to kind of like oversee. So a military commander would supervise the peasants underneath him and receive taxes from the peasants and pay taxes and as a tax collector. So by creating this theme system, the peasants have a chance to become landowners, which is always a boost in their social status and wealth, and it also increased the size of their military, which allowed them to defend against invaders. But over time, we see, just like how it happened in Rome, right? So this is a similarity to Rome. Is that over time we see that the elite, upper class, wealthy Byzantines begin purchasing land from the poor peasants. And as they grew wealthier and they had greater and greater land and greater wealth, they were able to avoid to pay taxes because they had so much power that they could just kind of like bribe their way out. And we know that without taxes, without a revenue, governments can't pay for infrastructure, can't pay for military, can't pay for anything, and this kind of leads is one of the undoings of the Byzantine Empire, one of those internal problems. Now, of course, these peasants, at first they had for a long time they had the opportunity to move up in society through the theme system, but as the theme system collapsed and failed, we constantly see rebellions against the government. Because the peasants, their opportunities are very limited, and they had to continue paying taxes, while the rich kind of get to refuse to pay taxes if they don't really want to. So the theme system works for a long time, but eventually fails. Right. So the emperor, right here we see the emperor in the theme system. He gives the authority to oversee a territory to a military governor, military commander. And the military commander can recruit peasants into the military and then give land to those peasants, to those soldiers, as a payment of their service. Now, the Byzantines also were important for trade. In fact, they were the center of they participated into 3 different trade networks. So, for example, they were trading along the Silk Road. So we're going to see the Silk Road come back into action. So they're going to trade with China, they're going to trade with India. We'll also see how they're going to trade along the Mediterranean, that is to Europe and to North Africa, and along the Black Sea, which is a new trade network right? And we see the Black Sea up here, and that would allow them to trade with Russia and with Central Asia. So they use Byzance, which is their coin, their gold coin. It was a standard coin. And another reason why the economy was so strong was because they had a lot of agricultural surplus. So they had a lot of rich farmland that they could rely on. So again, here we see these trade networks, right? With, Silk Road coming from here, right? The Constantinople here's the Black Sea, so they're going to be trading up here with Russia. They're also going to be trading along the Mediterranean, right, with Europe and North Africa. So in Constantinople, right, center of trade, it lasts for a long time, and very wealthy for a long time. Moving on to their culture, right here we see a picture of what Constantinople would have looked like. And when you go ahead and look at this side of the image, right, that is a racetrack that it was called the Hippodrome, right? The Byzantines absolutely loved chariot racing, and that is, of course, something that they adopted from the Romans. So religion, of course, played a central role in the Byzantine Empire. They loved drawing or depicting Jesus and the saints and Mary and all other religious figures, believing that it allowed people to have a personal connection to God. And so they have a lot of icons, and of course we know that at one point those icons would be banned. But they also drew in mosaics, right, which is those little tiles that you combine to create a bigger image. A lot of their literature is going to focus on religion as well. And we're going to see that Greek is the standard language of the Byzantines, right? So even though they consider themselves Romans and they consider themselves a continuation of Roman civilization and Roman Empire, they're really Greek, right? So they're not going to speak Latin, they're going to speak Greek because most of them are Greeks. So here we see the Byzantine, images, and this is the mosaics, right? This is their form of artwork, right? Those little tiles creating things, and you notice, of course, that the images are not very realistic looking. They're not very, accurate to human features. So they don't really care too much about making perfect images. It's just, the importance is the image itself. Another thing that we see that the Byzantines do, especially their priests and their monks, because they did have monks, is something called illuminated manuscripts. So basically it's, picture books for the Bible. All right, so you have a lot of images, and of course each page has to be hand-drawn and handwritten. And these, would take, years to make, and they were super expensive. They were elaborately decorated, so they put like gold lining and, jewels and everything. And they became very popular items to purchase amongst the elites. And like I mentioned before, the church. The Orthodox Church, they operated schools and education, and for example, they created the University of Constantinople, and this is where people would train to become bureaucrats, train to be part of the government, whether it's practicing law or medicine or tax collecting, or to be part of the clergy or the priesthood of the Orthodox faith. So Constantinople, of course, is this cultural center, right? Just like Rome used to be kind of like the center of attention, and now it's Constantinople. They're going to have this huge church, which at that time was the largest church in the world, called the Hagia Sophia, and it was actually built during the time of Justinian. And here we see again the influence of the Roman culture with this gigantic dome on top of here. So the Byzantines, their architecture is very much influenced by the Romans. Eventually, Constantinople will fall to the Turks and to the Ottoman Turks, and we'll see that the Church of Hagia Sophia would eventually be converted into a mosque, and that's what it is to this day. And Constantinople, of course, is now known as Istanbul. So they have the church, they have the university, and here are the chariot racing. It was one of those big popular events And kind of like how the Romans used gladiator fights and chariot racings to kind of distract the peasants. Same thing was happening here with the Byzantines. Free food and free games and free entertainment to kind of like ease the tensions between, the different social classes in Constantinople. So the Byzantine Empire eventually begins to decline, and then basically around the year 1000 it starts declining rapidly. And there's numerous reasons why, just like any other civilization. Now, one of the reasons they actually survived for as long, besides that they were wealthy, is that they had this technology called the Greek fire, right? And it basically allowed them, it was like a flamethrower, and it allowed them to shoot fire at ships. And because Constantinople is on a peninsula, meaning mostly surrounded by water, it means that any attack on the city to try to conquer the city, you have to go with ships. So the Byzantines will set up these kind of like flamethrowers and burn down the ships as they attempted to invade. So the strong economy again allowed them to hire soldiers and pay for military and pay for defenses and walls and everything else to protect the city. But they even though the center of the empire, Constantinople, was always protected, but the rest of the empire would fall, right, and be conquered by different people, mainly Muslims, right, which is what chapter 8 is going to talk about, is the Islamic Empire. The Muslims will conquer most of the territory of the Byzantines, and eventually they will conquer and take over the Byzantine Empire. We mentioned before this wealth gap that developed, right, between peasants and the rich aristocracy, the rich nobles. And the end result is that it will weaken the military, which will weaken their defenses and cause invaders to come in and conquer. Another reason they decline is during the Crusades, right, which we'll talk about in another chapter. But basically, during the Crusades, the Byzantine emperor at one point asked the Pope in Rome to send soldiers to help them fight off against the Muslims, right? Because the Muslims had taken over so much land of the Byzantine territory, including the city of Jerusalem, which is considered a holy city for Christians. So the Pope had sent soldiers, numerous times, and these were known as the Crusades, right? This attempt to push back the Muslims and reconquer the Holy Land of Jerusalem from the Muslims. And in the Fourth Crusade, right, because there was numerous ones, but the Fourth Crusades, the Venetians, which is we will talk about in another chapter, is a growing trade center as well, and they're competing with Constantinople. So instead of sending soldiers to go, reconquer Jerusalem, the Venetians, who have this massive fleet of ships, send the soldiers, send these European knights, these crusaders, to go attack Constantinople, right? And it's kind of like messed up because they were supposed to be fighting against the Muslims who they're viewed as their enemy, but instead they end up fighting against Christians, right? So it's Catholic Christians versus Orthodox Christians, and the end result is that Constantinople is sacked, right? They actually opened their doors and opened their gates and allowed the Crusaders to come in, thinking that they were friendly, and the end result is that they betrayed them and attacked them and stole all their stuff and killed a whole bunch of people, and the capital never recovers from this crusade. And the end result is that the empire is, permanently weakened, and Venice grows stronger over time and controls greater part of the trade network of in the Mediterranean. And Constantinople, like I said, is weakened. So they had external problems with Muslims, they had external problems with other Christians, and then they also had all those internal economic problems between peasants and nobles. So you combine all of those, we see eventually that the Byzantine Empire is on its way to collapse. And we'll talk about that next.